go ahead and call this meeting to order. Welcome to the Fish and Wildlife Commission meeting today, September 27th. We are really honored to be here in Gatlinburg. We had a full day of meetings yesterday, and it was very important to each member of this commission and the partners that we have all throughout the agency to prioritize convening in Gatlinburg within a year of very challenging time for this community. And we are really honored to have been hosted by not only our agency partners here, but the community. It's really been a phenomenal experience. And with that, I'd like to call on Commissioner Box for the invocation and Pledge of Allegiance.
Commissioners, please watch over us as we travel home today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. Ms. Dannette, if you would, please call the roll.
Dennis Gardner. Here. Angie Box. Here. Bill Cox. Here. Connie King. Here. Chad Baker.
Here.
James Stroud.
Here.
Bill Swan.
Yes, ma'am.
Kent Woods.
Here.
Brian McLaren.
Here.
Tony Sanders.
Here.
Kurt Holbert.
Here.
Jeff Cook.
Here.
Jamie Woodson.
Here.
Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you. With that, we'll move forward in your packets, and prior to this meeting, you received a draft of the minutes, and it should be on either your iPads or in front of you. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes. Second.
Moved by Commissioner Baker, seconded by Commissioner Cook. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. You adopt. With that, we'll just go straight into announcements. First, I see our partner at the Department of Agriculture, Boyd Barker, here with us today. Welcome. Thrilled you could make the trip, and always enjoy your presence and partnership. Thank you. Also, a quick moment of personal privilege. Friend of mine, Jim London, a fantastically successful attorney in Knoxville, has joined us this morning. We had an opportunity to use this convening to have an excuse to break bread together this morning here at the hotel. Also happens to be an avid sportsman, and I appreciate him for seeing what's going on with the Fish and Wildlife Commission. Welcome. We're glad you're here. Great. Any other announcements from members? We've got important guests who will be joining us as the agenda proceeds, but any other announcements for members of the commission? Excellent. With that, I would love to recognize Park Superintendent Clayton. We are so honored to be here, but to receive a particular welcome from the leader of our Great Smoky Mountains National Park. We're particularly thankful to be here and appreciate your leadership very, very much.
Well, thanks very much. And one clarification, my day job is the deputy superintendent. Came to the Smoky since about 2010, and I'm kind of the operations guy for the park. But my boss, Superintendent Cassius Cash, has been recalled temporarily on a detail to Washington. And so for the next few months, I'll be serving in the capacity as superintendent. But I really am honored to welcome you to Gatlinburg, and which is on the doorstep of America's most visited national park, Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And so, and of course, as you pointed out, it's a time when the community really appreciates your support. It's been a tough year for us all. But you know, aside from all that, it just really makes sense for the TWRA to come to this part of the state, to the Smokies, because I think it's a pretty well established, fact that the wildlife are just a little bit more impressive here. The bears are a little furrier, The deer, the bucks have a few more points than you find elsewhere. The trout, a little tastier. So it really makes sense, for you to come to this part of the state and experience the best of the wildlife that you're charged to represent the interests of. And as far as this agency and the Smokies, it is such an important relationship for us. Great Smoky Mountains National Park, there's a lot of moving parts, and we work with literally dozens of NGOs and government agencies to fulfill our mission here at the Smokies. But as a state partner, a conservation partner, TWRA, I can't think of another partner that is so critical for us to work hand in glove with than TWRA, as far as when we talk about those common interests on the enforcement side, the fishery side, the wildlife side. There, of course, as we know, the wildlife doesn't understand boundaries, and so if we're all going to be successful, for the National Park Service to be successful, for TWRA to be successful, we have to make sure that we're working in close partnership. And I think we can proudly say from both sides that we can point to a long-standing history of working in cooperation. And so with me today is our supervisory wildlife biologist, Bill Stiver, and he has a little presentation for you to talk about how the park works with TWRA. And I can't think of a better person to tell that story, because he's been here at the Smokies working with TWRA on wildlife issues for the past literally 30 years. And so with that, I'm going to get out of his way, because he can represent these interests much better. But again, I thank you. I'll stand quietly in the background, let Bill talk. But thanks for inviting us, and thanks for coming to this part of the state.
Thank you. Bill, welcome. We're glad you're with us today.
Thank you, Clay. Yeah, Brian asked me to come and kind of talk a little bit about some of our partnerships over the years, and I was really excited about that because, again, I have been here since 1988 as a graduate student under Mike Pelton, studying bears, and then was fortunate enough to get a job here in the Smokies. And literally, since I started my career here, I have worked with folks with TWRA, wildlife officers, and especially those here in the adjoining counties. So it's been a great ride, and I hope I can share some of the things that we've accomplished here over the years. So I always like to start a presentation to kind of put us in perspective, with the red being, of course, the Smokies. We have Forest Service land to the north, Forest Service land to the south, which, of course, is managed, the wildlife's managed by TWRA, and then private land, kind of to the northwest of Blount, Sevier, and Cocke counties in particular. And we'll get into some more details on why those counties are kind of important with respect to bear management. Again, we have a long history of working together. The park has worked with TWRA on wild hog management for a number of years, and in fact there was a time when we used to donate wild hogs to the state of Tennessee and North Carolina as part of an eradication program. And if you look back in time, you can see we donated from 1959 to 2005 900 hogs, or 20% of the hogs that we removed from the Tennessee side of the park. That agreement was terminated in 2003, and a lot of that was due to concerns with diseases associated with wild hogs. And in fact, 2005, our hogs became seropositive for pseudorabies, and our prevalence now is like 30-40%. So definitely things have changed. Thanks to Chuck Yost, who's in the audience here, we now are a partner with the Wild Hog Eradication Action Team. And again, everybody's goal is to eradicate wild hogs from the state of Tennessee. Back in the early 80s, TWRA was into a big deer restoration project, and the Park Service was approached about getting some deer from Cades Cove to help do this restoration in the counties. Again, these counties that were close to the park in East Tennessee. And you can see over a 3-year period, we darted and relocated nearly 300 deer out of Cades Cove. And it was not a control action for us as much as it was a restoration project for you all. And so we worked cooperatively to help establish deer herds in and around East Tennessee. We both kind of have worked recently on elk reintroductions. Now, we didn't work directly with TWRA on y'all's introduction, and ours is, of course, in North Carolina. But when we were in the middle of the project, we did have elk that would wander over onto private land in Tennessee, particularly Bull 81. He was the one that we seemed to deal with all the time, and go get him and bring him back, and then he'd just leave again. So Shelley Hammonds, who was a wildlife officer up in Cott County, worked a lot with her on that project. Back in the late 90s, we actually worked with Pete Wyatt and Eagle Foundation and Knoxville Zoo to do a little bit of barn owl augmentation in the Smokies, particularly Cades Cove. And so Pete was pretty instrumental in us getting these owls, and we actually put transmitters on them and had a nice little project in trying to get barn owls reestablished. We've been pretty heavily involved lately with bats and with white nose syndrome coming to our region and essentially wiping out 4 species of bats in particular: Indiana bat, little brown bat, tricolored bat, and northern long-eared bat. And so we now have a Tennessee bat working group, which we all are a partner in, and this working group shares information, bat surveys, and the status of bat species here in Tennessee. Probably the thing that I've worked the most on over the years together with TWRA is black bear management. Obviously, it's a charismatic megafauna here in East Tennessee, very popular species to hunters and non-hunters in our region. And we have had a long-standing black bear management agreement, and it's between us and TWRA and the Forest Service, which allows us to manage bears across boundaries. So in my case, and this is me, it gives us the flexibility to move bears outside of the park. And this thing's not going to work. Sorry. Let's see. And so it gives us the opportunity, if we have a nuisance bear, to move it over onto Forest Service land. We know that as big as the Smokies is, it's still not big enough. Most bears can find their way back, and so it allows us to move bears when we need to. It also allows us, to manage individual bear cubs in the Appalachian Bear Rescue, and I'll get into that here in a second. We did work cooperatively to reintroduce bears into the Big South Fork. That was kind of spearheaded by local bear hunters wanting bears reintroduced into the plateau area back in the 90s. And if I remember right, it was Tennessee Bear and Boar Association, I think, that was really pushing for that. And so we moved bears during the winter and the summer from the Smokies up to the Big South Fork, and that population certainly has taken off. I know there's been a very successful hunting season in the last few years up in those counties that surround Big South Fork, and some really, really nice bears up there. We've worked a lot over the years on a variety of trainings and workshops, chemical immobilization training. The Eastern Black Bear Workshop was right here in Gatlinburg. The International Bear Association conference was here. Bear attack response training we did together just a couple of years ago. And I did want to mention that Dan Gibbs and I were working pretty hard to bring the 5th International Human Bear Conflicts Workshop to Gatlinburg next spring. And this conference focuses on human bear issues. It's specific to that. And we expect 250 to 300 bear managers all over North America, polar bear biologists, grizzly bear biologists, bring their expertise here to East Tennessee, as well as a bunch of vendors, different dumpsters, bear-proof trash cans, the goal is to bring all that expertise here, and it'll be the first time that it's ever been in the eastern United States. So we're really excited about pulling this workshop together and helping us address some of the human-bear conflicts we have in our region. We are pretty heavily involved. You all are probably familiar with this, the Bear Hair DNA Project, trying to get a regional population estimate for the entire southern Appalachians. And some of those sample sites this year, this is kind of distribution in Tennessee this year on where they sampled. And they're collecting hair DNA, putting barbed wire out, collecting DNA, and then we'll ultimately come up with a population density. We've also been partnering on some bear research with GPS collars, and this is some pretty cool technology, putting these GPS collars on bears. We worked with the Appalachian Bear Rescue, and many of you are familiar with them, and again, that's a partner for us and you all. Looking at how, when they rehab these bear cubs, do they survive? Are they contributing to the population? And we just ended a 2-year study. Coy Blair will be wrapping that up pretty soon. We're also working on a GPS project right here around Gatlinburg. Many of you may be aware that there's actually a Gatlinburg Black Bear Task Force, and we've renamed it Bear Task Force because we've clearly learned that it goes beyond Gatlinburg. But that task force has been in place since 1989, and I remember going to the very first meeting as a graduate student. And we've made some accomplishments, but we still have some progress. And one of the things we're doing is putting GPS collars on and letting the bears show us the areas that we need to address. And it's been quite interesting. This is a slide of a female bear that we collared in Elkmont. So if I don't have a pointer, but if you look down in the lower center, that's originally where she started. And then if you follow the line up, she went all the way out of the park, all the way up to Pigeon Forge, circled around, came down through between Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg, then circled to the east up in Pittman Center, and then went up to Dollywood, then went over to downtown Sevierville. And this is the Walter State Community College campus. And you see that cluster of points. We were looking for cluster of points. You know, cluster of points might mean food or garbage. Well, this movement occurred in 2015 when we had a food failure, and somehow she found a cluster of oak trees right there. It was pretty amazing that she was able to find it. But on the way, she did a little peeking, and she ended up on Facebook a couple of times. And this is in literally downtown Sevierville, walking through the parking lots in downtown Sevierville, and she actually found some oak trees in downtown Sevierville. So what it's telling us, this study's telling us, is you know, the partnerships that we need to develop, again, go beyond Gatlinburg. These bears are spending time in Pigeon Forge. We had a bear from Gatlinburg that ended up on the Foothills Wildlife Management Area. We had bears from Cosby that ended up in Gatlinburg. We've had Gatlinburg bears end up over at Fontana. We've had bears from Mount LeConte end up down in Gatlinburg. So when we talk about partnerships and managing bears, again, we can't do it alone. And so this data is really kind of showing us that we need to work together, not only just our two agencies, but community leaders in this region. The last thing I wanted to mention is, I've been fortunate to be at the Smokies for 30 years, and I've had an opportunity to work with a lot of young people. I've had probably 150 interns, maybe another 50 seasonals come through our wildlife program. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of opportunity for them to move on within our agency. But I've had a lot of them move on to your agency. And this is just a few names. There's a lot more names out there, but Aubrey Deck. Tim Sane worked for me in 1992. He was one of the first interns I ever had. And so you see a lot of familiar names, Greg Julian, Brandon Ware down in Tellico. And I put Bart Carter and John Hammonds. I know they're both in the room here today. They used to work in the Smokies in our fisheries program. And again, what I'm highlighting is just what we did in wildlife. But we have a fisheries program equally as good as wildlife that partners with TWRA. We have our law enforcement folks who partner with the wildlife officers in the counties here surrounding the park. But the one thing, again, that I've been really proud of is mentoring these young people, and then having those long-term relationships, and being able to see these guys in the room today and talk about different things. So, again, I appreciate y'all having me. That's just a snapshot of some of the things that we've done over the years, and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Bill. Any questions? First, thank you so much for this presentation. I think the female bear that you tracked, her path was a little like the commissions over the last few days in the area. We've got family members who've been in Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg, and made the whole round. Maybe looking for more than acorns, though, perhaps. But we really appreciate the dedication that you all give and the partnership with the agency. So thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Any other questions or any questions from?
Yeah, I've got a quick one.
Thanks, Commissioner Cox.
If you can kind of summarize quickly, what do you think the effect of the fire has been on the wildlife, bears and deer and everything? What do you see?
Well, that's a great question. We actually had 8 bears with GPS collars on within the fire perimeter, and in fact, Jessica Giacomini, who's doing the study, the boundary study for us, and Coy Blair, who was doing the ABR research, they partnered on a few those 8 bears that they had within the zone, and we didn't see any major effect on their movements. What would be interesting would be to do some post-fire work, because we have a year or 2 years worth of data on how those bears used the landscape pre-fire, and there is an opportunity to maybe partner on some funding. The park has a little bit of funding available to do some post-fire work, and I would be definitely interested in a potential partnership on that to look at the long-term effects on bear movements and bear habitat in that area. We documented 2 bears that died during the fire. One of them weighed, it was a big male bear, he weighed 598 pounds. And then I think a 40-pound cub succumbed to some injuries that it had. We ended up putting it down. Other than that, I think they found a blue jay and maybe a squirrel. We really didn't see much. And in fact, the turkeys were right in the black right after the fire had happened. So, but we do have this opportunity, and I actually have talked to Dan Gibbs about this, about do we want to try to foster any partnership and see if we can't see what happens with those bears.
Yes, sir.
I have a
Commissioner
question.
Stroud.
I don't know how long ago, but a few years ago, was there a lady that was mauled in the bear?
We have had one fatality here, and that was back in 2000. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Is there any? Well, I'm sure you get encounters. Is there anything else like that, or do you guys?
We have had, yes, we have had similar encounters. We had a young man pulled out of a hammock 2 years ago, but he was literally by the back of his head, and Dad jumped on the bear and kicked it and fought it off and got his son out. And back in 2008, we had a young boy, an 8-year-old boy, that was bear jumped on him, took him down. Dad pulled the bear off and told the boy to run, and he let go of the bear, and the bear took him down a second time, and Dad pulled the bear off. So we've had some really good dads, some super dads, pull some bears off, and but we have had some similar injuries. Fortunately, they were not fatalities.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much
All
for
right,
your
thank you.
presentation and your time today. Perfect. With that, I'd like to recognize Captain Tommy Whitehead.